I think some audience are running late, but we can get everything started for now. Can everyone see my screen clearly? Good. So hello, everyone. Thank you for tuning in the Impact Livestream Japan Offshore Wind Updates 2022. My name is Molly Huang, Content Lead of Leader Associates and your host of today's session. I welcome you all here. Talking about the Japan offshore wind market, I believe we are all aware of the target, 10 gigawatt offshore wind capacity by 2030 and 30 to 45 gigawatt capacity by 2040. But there are always gaps between the plan and the actual delivery. What are the roads and roadblocks we see so far? How can we reach the ambitious target at speed and scale? And most importantly, what issues must be addressed head-on for creating a successful Japan offshore wind industry? With all these questions in mind, luckily in the following 1.5 hours, we will have 6 distinguished speakers to ask advice for. Here on the screen, you can see our today's agenda and speakers, starting from an overview of the market status by Uchida Yukinobu-san of DNV Energy Systems, followed by a deep dive into the regulatory conditions in eyes of Baker McKenzie, addressed by Tanabe Masahiro-san. A special panel discussion is also structured here so as to understand the market more from a business development sense, with knowledge sharing from Nakagawa Hiroaki-san, Head of Procurement of RENOVA, Ms. Kanna Mihara, Associate Director from Macquarie, Mr. Pelayo Rodríguez Alonso, Senior Business Development Manager of Ocean Winds, and last but not least, Iwao Hiroshi-san, Associate General Manager for Structured Finance at Sumitomo Mitsui Trust Bank. I believe today we will have a very productive and informative session, and personally, I really look forward to hearing the insights. A few more words about us in case you are not familiar. Leader Associates is an international clean energy event organizer focusing on solar, wind, energy storage, and green hydrogen. We've been interacting with the Japan market since 2019. I think it's the starting year of offshore wind in Japan. On this October the 11th to 12th, we'll also be hosting our in-person event in Yokohama, which is the 4th edition of Japan Wind Energy 2022. The event is also co-located with our 5th Solar Energy Future Japan 2022 and the 2nd Connecting Green Hydrogen Japan 2022. So to create a comprehensive future energy business meeting place. And that's all of the advertisement. Without further ado, I'd like to kick off today's session by welcoming our first presenter on stage, Uchida Yukinobu-san of DNV, and fire up his presentation. Uchida-san, may you already turn on your video and the audio system? Can you kindly switch the screen to your side, and now the floor is yours.
Yeah. So thank you, Mori, for introduction. And my name is Yukinobu Uchida. I'm country manager for DNV Japan. And this morning I will present how DNV is supporting offshore wind industry in Japan. And yeah. So about me, I've been working for DNV for almost the last 2 decades, and before that I was active, developer. I was working for a company called Tome, which today became US Energy, and I was deeply involved in development in US, UK, Spain, Italy, and Japan. And yeah, I think we have a quite extensive support in renewable space, and in Japan we've been supporting almost all the renewable projects in Japan from the very beginning of the Japanese market, and we also give advice to METI and MRIT, for some crucial matters. And I personally I'm a member of IC standardization committee for technical standard of availability, and also supporting Japanese committee for standardization. That's about me. So in Japan, yeah, there have been a lot of challenges, and yeah, I mean, yeah, I guess that the first one was there has been a lack of clear national roadmap for offshore wind, I think the positive thing is that METI has announced, it's a very ambitious plan for carbon neutral, and they say offshore wind, 10 gigawatt by 2030, 30 to 40 gigawatt by 2050, and most importantly, local procurement, is expected, to reach to 60% by 2040, and to get to that stage, it's very crucial for the market that the initial series of projects are successfully implemented and materialized and demonstrate that offshore wind is competitive and reliable, and affordable, yes. And then we give advice to METI when they are setting so-called offshore wind promotion law. I think METI wanted to introduce a kind of a Dutch model, but not in a perfect manner, and it was very frustrated for us, because if they follow it, it has to be a perfect copy and paste, but they didn't copy everything. And the most obvious lack of legal framework that I think they recognized is that they didn't initiate selection of the site and also initiation of the site investigation. So I think that they're going to introduce a so-called centralized system for site investigation for the following project. And it's very important that offshore wind is expected to be very competitive. So that's why METI and MRIT are running auction. And there has been a lot of activity, also technically support this, and DNB was commissioned, many research work, including, floating offshore studies, how MRIT can relax, some requirement for floating structure while keeping, stability of the floating platform, so this kind of technical challenges are continuing, and we are also supporting a lot of demonstration projects. We are doing a lot of turbine modeling and couplet analysis of loading, and I think we've been supporting almost all the R&D project, for floating, subsidized by NEDO, and we have also a cost tool, cost modeling tool to simulate, projects. And the big topic is how to get a grid connection, and this part is also very frustrating because the process is only one-way communication, and there's no transparency in the process, and I think again METI has recognized this is a serious issue, so there must be some clean action to boost the available grid connection capacity for renewables, and initiation for cross-regional interconnection have been already implemented, but the process looks very, very slow because there's an organization called OCTO, but this organization really consists of an existing electric utility company. So I think this is very frustrating, and we need to take more proactive action to make it happen much quickly. And we can of course do a lot of technical assessment for what will be the amount of grid connection capacity available to renewables. We also do a short-term forecasting, that is a short energy production forecast for the next 1 hour to 1 week, we can provide this for each 1 hour, and we also update the forecast for every 1 hour. This service is actually used for wind farms in Hokkaido. That is part of the requirement by Hokkaido Electric Power, and we can also have reviewed most of the large energy storage systems used in Hokkaido for renewables, and I think we are one of the most trusted technical consultants by the lenders for these projects. And yeah, we've been also supporting developers slash sponsors, and we supported the winning bidder for the round 1 project, for all 3 projects. So it's really our honor to support this customer. So we can do some initial wind mapping and monitoring campaign support. That is how to capture wind from a lot of restrictions that as of today nobody really wanted to install offshore wind masts, because it costs a lot, and the permission, the process for permit takes long, and but we give advice, how to do it, to really capture the wind, both vertical and horizontal, coverage, and yeah, and we can also do the risk register. That's very important, to understand and mitigate the risk. Yeah. So, and there are a lot of technical challenges. We've been supporting a lot of specific design matters. We work for almost all the contractors and the OEMs for the existing offshore project. And we are also leading, joint industry project. It is called S. For that is the best, practice for design, against typhoon and earthquakes. For markets like Taiwan and Japan. We published, recommended practice, last year, and the extended an activity, so-called S2, is now under mobilization. And we managed to invite major EPC contractors and a few developers from Japan to actively participate in this joint industry project. And University of Tokyo also participated as a document reviewer. So I think Japan made a lot of contribution for establishment of design process for supporting structure. And on the certification side, again, I know it has been a lot of frustration in the industry. We give advice to METI how certification system is used in most advanced for countries. And our certification division can also provide certification services. And another challenge is I see that site investigation campaign led by METI / Emirates, so far has been very, very poor. All the bidders, they got a very small amount of poor quality information to prepare their bid. So that's obvious challenge, and we hope we can make a more influence to the METI. They should really take support from a professional like us for more useful, to gather more useful site investigation data. I think that's very important, for running auction process in a smooth manner. Yeah. And it's also important to keep confidence to financial and also in insurance industry, and we can do the verification services, technical due diligence, or project certification. And most recently, we did a marine warranty survey for Akita and Noshiro port project, and actually last 2 days, we ran hazard risk identity workshop for Akita and Noshiro offshore project, to cover, very challenging, load out, installation and commissioning process, for the smooth interface of the, all the, contractor and turbine OEM. So, and those are, really the focus, for successful implementation of the project. I think I've already used my time, so I think this is the end of my presentation. If any time left, I can take maybe question. Thank you for the attention.
Thank you, Uchida-san, for a preliminary introduction. And you used the words frustrating several times in the presentation with regards to the auction scheme, to the grid connection constraints, to the certification process, etc. That to some extent reflects the industry attitude at this moment.
I mean, yeah, we all, our attitude, we all support each other. And I think Meti and Emily are very supportive. But we all are in a learning curve. So there are a lot of things that things can be improved, Yeah.
Right. Yeah. And the good thing is for the next presentation and the following panel discussion, we will touch on all these sectors. I saw there's one question in the Q&A box, but I would like to save it at the end of at the end of talk, so we can, bring all this information together and review one another.
Okay.
So I think now we can welcome our next speaker on stage. That would be Tanabe Masahiro-san. Tanabe-san, you will be touched on the regulatory part of the situation. And please share your screen, and I look forward to it.
Okay, thank you, Molly. I hope you can see my slides on the screen now. So hello, hello everyone. My name is Masa Tanabe. I'm counsel in the Tokyo office of Baker McKenzie, and I'm a member of the office's Finance and Projects Group. I'm also a lawyer in Japan and a lawyer in New York. So I've been assisting clients from a legal and regulatory perspective. So recently, a lot of the focus has been on offshore wind projects in Japan. And we've been assisting foreign offshore wind developers in their offshore wind projects in Japan. But what we see in through these projects is that there's very little information out there in the English language. So in today's very brief 15-minute session, I'd like to give a brief overview, high-level overview of the Japanese regulations relating to offshore wind projects. Okay. Here we go. So in the next 15 minutes, I'd like to touch upon 3 points. One is what happened in the round 1 results that came out in December last year. Number 2 is what will the rounds 2 and 3 look like? And number 3 is what changes might there be? What changes might be there after the rounds 2 and 3? Okay, so this is a very quick summary of what happened in round 1. Many of you might already know, METI released the results of round 1 on December 24th. And basically they released this table. They released the winners of the projects for these 3 projects. And they also released the points that were granted to each of the consortium members without mentioning the names. And there were points here, as you can see, but it only shows the price component and the non-price component. We call it feasibility component here. But there was no breakdown of how that feasibility component points were allocated. And there were not much information on the business plans of these consortiums. And so there was a lot of, like Uchida-san said, there's a lot of frustration in the industry because there was a lack of disclosure of information on the results of the round one auctions. So what happened after this release of the winners? The industry, mainly the Japan Wind Power Association, JWPA, discussed these issues and submitted a request letter to METI and MLET in February, requesting more disclosure of information and possible changes to the auction rules. And then in mid-March, METI announced that they will postpone or delay the procedures for round two auctions. And then in late March, METI had a committee meeting discussing what actually happened to round one and what rule changes should be implemented for round two and round three. There were discussions about rule changes, but nothing was fixed. There were committee members that were in favor of changing rules, but there were also members that were against changing the rules largely. So it's not really clear what will happen to the future rounds, rounds 2 and 3. So again, nothing is fixed for rounds 2 and 3. But what is expected is listed here. The schedules and the rules, the auction rules, rounds 2 and 3, will likely come out later this year. So nothing is really clear about the rules. What changes will there be compared to round one? But what is pretty clear, relatively clear, is that for round 2, it will be, again, under the feed-in tariff regime. Whereas for round 3, it will likely be a competition under the feed-in premium regime. So for round 3 bidders, you'll need to be prepared for the feed-in premium regime. So what's the difference between feed-in tariff and feed-in premium, and how do you prepare for feed-in premium? The feed-in tariff was easy because the developer would just sell the electricity to the utility and receive a price. A feed-in premium regime, the developer would need to sell the electricity to the market or retailer or other off-takers and receive the purchase price. And then they will get another premium from Octo or from the government through Octo for that the sales volume. So the developer would need to sell the electricity or find a place to sell its electricity to maximize the revenue from the electricity generated from the power plants. When we get questions, what's the Japanese feed-in premium? Is it similar to the European system? In particular, the contract for difference regime in the UK? The answer is basically yes. Basically, it's a contract for difference. You have the bid price and you have the market reference price. The premium would be the difference between those two figures. So basically, yes, it is the same, but the calculation of the premium is a little bit unique in Japan. Like Uchida-san said, the Japanese government, METI, MLET, is looking to the European systems, but they didn't just copy and paste. They adjusted substantially, so the calculation has become a very Japanese original calculation. So this is something to watch out for when you're thinking about feed-in premium. when you do sell your power, electricity, to someone, it could be the market, it could be a retailer, it could be an off-taker. But when you sell the electricity to off-taker, you need to be careful. In Japan, corporate PPAs are available, but you need to consider the regulations because some aspects of a corporate PPA are restricted. So you need to navigate through these regulations. So here, it's basically physical PPAs and virtual PPAs. There are ways to do these both ways. Physical PPA, virtual PPAs are available in Japan. But physical PPAs, depending on how you design the physical PPAs, there are regulatory restrictions. So on-site is more for solar. So for offshore wind, you want to do the self-wheeling type or sleeve type. But there aren't many projects that are doing this self-wheeling or sleeve type at the moment. So you need to consider carefully on how to design these types of physical PPA. Virtual PPAs are possible, legally possible, but you do need, at the moment, you need retailers to be involved as intermediary. But the rules are changing, so maybe in the next year's presentation, this might change. And to my understanding, there are no existing projects doing virtual PPAs in Japan yet, but there might be projects under consideration for virtual PPAs that may be coming in Japan very shortly. What else? After round 2, round 3, what changes might there be in Japan? Well, the first point I wanted to raise was batteries and hydrogen. At the moment, there aren't offshore wind projects that associates with batteries or hydrogen, to my understanding. But there are projects that are considering the batteries and hydrogen to be associated with the offshore wind project. In Hokkaido, there is one that will go through an experimental project with batteries and hydrogen. So this might be a trend in the upcoming years, and which will complicate from a regulatory perspective. There might be complications to associating batteries and hydrogen. The second point is the grid connection process. And this was also touched upon by Uchida-san earlier. The grid connection process is separate from the offshore wind process. So it's a burden on the developers. You had to do both separately. But now the Japanese government is trying to link together these two separate processes. So in the future, it will be much more efficient with the grid connection process, linking together with the offshore wind auction process. The third point, also touched upon by Uchida-san, is the Japanese-style centralized auction system. Currently, the developers will need to do the surveys themselves. So if there are 3 or 5 bidders in one auction process, all 5 bidders will need to do all the surveys themselves from the beginning. And that was very inefficient. So the plan is to have a centralized system where the government will undertake those initial surveys and disclose them to potential bidders so that they can use that information to plan their bid. There are 3 pilot programs going on in Japan, in the northern part of Japan. And so this could become the norm in the coming years. So there is a lot of things happening from a regulatory perspective. And we need to take a close look at those changes and the discussions being made at METI and EMLET. We'll keep looking closely, and we're looking forward to sharing those information or discussing issues with industry and all the developers in the industry. So we're happy to help, and we're happy to discuss, and we're happy to share information. So we look forward to discussing with you on these topics. Thank you, and back to you, Molly.
Thank you, Tanabe-san, for this brief but very clear presentation. As you mentioned, that Japanese government learns from the European system, but they don't simply copy and paste. Today, we see Japan market more like a magic box unopened. There are so much we haven't tapped, and the future is yet to come. I think the challenge for us is how to find certainties or how to build certainties amid all these uncertainties. And that opens our third part of today's session and the panel discussion. We will save questions for Baker McKenzie at the end of today. So please kindly wait for just a few minutes.
Okay,
thank you. And now I'd like to invite again Uchida-san on stage along with his dear panel colleagues. May you kindly open up your camera and the audio system? And I will just have Uchida-san do the introduction.
Thank you, Mori. So for the next half an hour, I think we like to have a lively discussion about our challenges and solution on the offshore wind market in Japan. And I'd like to introduce the participants for the discussion. So maybe each of you please give a brief introduction, maybe 1 minute or maybe shorter. I want to ask Mihara-san, Kanna-san. Can you please introduce yourself?
Thank you, Uchida-san. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah. My name is Kanna Mihara. I've been working for Macquarie's Tokyo office for 9 years. And last few years, I've been leading renewable development business in Japan for Macquarie Capital's principal investment business. So we are part of Macquarie Group, which does principal investment rather than fund investment. So our business is basically a developer. We are developing 6 offshore wind projects, 2 of them with local Japanese partners. So very good to participate in this panel. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Next, Pelayo, can you please?
Hello, everyone. I'm today representing OWU. OWU is a joint venture between ENGIE, a French utility, and EDPR, the 4th biggest offshore wind developer in the world. We develop, construct, and operate offshore wind farms. We are fully focused, solely focused on offshore wind. And we have currently quite good news during the early stage of this year. We have won auctions in New York Bight and ScotWind. We are, of course, home market is Europe. We are based in Madrid. And in Asia, we have 2 main offices. One is in Korea, and the other one is in Japan. We're looking to expand our portfolio of projects in Asia. I'm very looking forward for the conversation today.
Thank you. And Iwao-san.
Thank you very much for introducing me. Yeah, I'm Hiroshi Iwao, joining from Sumitomo Mitsui Trust Bank today, the SMTB and Sumitomo Trust. I'm working on the project finance for renewable energy fields such as solar power and wind power for both the onshore and offshore and other sectors. And actually, we supported last year the developers who participated in the first round offshore wind projects, and also we also participated in the first commercial offshore wind projects in Akita port in 2020. And then we have so far participated in total 16 offshore wind projects in Europe. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And Nakagawa-san, please.
Thank you, Uchida-san. Hello, everyone. So my name is Hiroaki Nakagawa, head of procurement of RENOVA, where I'm supporting the entire renewable energy power plant construction, not only in Japan, but also around Asian regions. And the RENOVA has been developing the power plants like geothermal and hydro and onshore offshore wind power plants. So now I'm fully involved in the offshore wind power plant constructions in Japan and also Vietnam. Thank you very much for having me again. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so I think we like to kick off a discussion. I think the first theme is it's great that the Japanese government has somehow, ambitious target, but how can it be achieved, and what to be the challenges from the viewpoint of developers / sponsors? Maybe I want to ask Mihara-san to open the discussion. Can you tell us what will be your challenges?
Yeah, thank you, Uchida-san. Yeah, so Tanabe sensei provided very comprehensive updates on regulatory developments. I'd like to point a few things which we think are very important for development of offshore wind in Japan going forward. I think the first point is revision of the auction rules, which METI is currently considering. I think important points are, one, first of all, more disclosure of scoring results. From round one, the government didn't disclose details of how each bidders was scored, and that's a very important information for future auctions. So for development of the market, I think that's very crucial. And also emphasis on timing of completion of a project. So in the first round, of course, the scoring system included some scoring for timing of completion of a project, but it wasn't really clear how much that should be appreciated, or how the scoring, so the basically weighting of the score for that point was very minimum. So the government is now considering clearly incentivizing projects to achieve completion faster. I think that's a very important point for development of the market as well. And yeah, lastly, it's a little bit controversial as well, but government is considering to avoid the concentration of all the projects to very small number of developers. And yeah, that's probably worth a lot of discussion, and we are watching how that discussion develops. Also on the central scheme, that's very welcome as well for developers' point of view. As Tanabe sensei mentioned, with central scheme, developers don't have to do overlapping surveys individually. But I think the current discussion on central scheme in METI and MLIT don't include stakeholder engagement in the central scheme. I think that's the crucial part. Developers need to spend a lot of time and potentially cost on. So as long as that stakeholder engagement is not included in the central scheme, probably introduction of joint survey doesn't really accelerate the timeline of the project. So yeah, I think we would like the scope of central scheme to be slightly expanded. Lastly, as Uchida-san rightly pointed out, a grid connection is such a big bottleneck currently for any renewable development in Japan. So we really would like the government to accelerate implementation grid master plan, which Octo is currently finalizing, especially in Hokkaido to Tokyo subsea HVDC cable. So that kind of big project, it would be very difficult to implement, but it's really crucial for the entire renewable development in Japan. So we would like the government to structure these projects very well and make sure it's going to be implemented fast and cost effectively. That's all from me. Thank you.
Thank you, Mihara-san, for so insightful the talk, and yeah, it's very useful. I also like to ask Pelayo to share your view on the market, how you want to see market develop.
Thank you, Uchida-san. Little to say after what Mihara-san mentioned. I will add my answer on Tanabe's presentation and Mihara-san explanations right now. I think two comments that Tanabe-san phrased and during his presentation was that maybe next year presentation is completely different. And perhaps also the other comment that he mentioned is that he sees a very bright future for offshore. This brings us to two conclusions, basically. Japan has an enormous potential. We see the country as one of the main markets for offshore wind, particularly floating offshore wind. And the other point is maybe next year the regulation changes. We don't know right now what are the regulation and what's going to be the regulation. And for companies like, I assume, with same opinion for Mihara-san, and for Ocean Winds, it's complicated when you want to operate as a developer and you don't know what rules are going to be there in 1 year or 2 years. So we are looking forward to the improvement of those rules. Building up with what Mihara-san says, I think another key point is the ports. I think that Japan needs to improve harbor shipyards. It's a really bottleneck that we may face, particularly, for example, in areas where we are seeing a lot of development, like Akita. I think we may have kind of a traffic jam in terms of number of projects that we are going to face there if things move as it seems like it's going to be the next rounds too in the first round. And yes, I will repeat points like the grid process and of course the grid itself in Japan is very complex with this the country is divided in two, and most of the power in terms of wind power is concentrated in the northern part of Japan when there is not such a good interconnection, and therefore this is another bottleneck. Then we have another doubts which are very important for developers, which is, of course, we have amazing targets that were announced by the Japanese government, but it's important for us to have what we may call road to market. So how we achieve those targets, and a stable remuneration is important, not only from a development point of view, but I think for a supply chain, knowing that this is stable and this is going to not be just 1 year on auction and then 3 years within an auction and then 4 years. I mean, having some stable market is very, very important also for the supply chain. And a very topic that is discussed a lot in many of the webinars is the reduction of the cost. I think it's interesting for everyone. We are of the opinion, looking at other experiences in other markets like Europe, that we shouldn't drive everything on reduction of cost. If we have clarity on regulation and we can start develop, the cost will go down for sure. I mean, there is like the egg and the chicken idea, right? What's first? So we believe that having regulation and proper stability will allow for this cost reduction. It's very, very important to have that. And Japan really needs it. We cannot lag behind most of the countries. I would finally want to mention that you have your neighbor Korea developing projects at a larger scale at this moment, floating offshore projects. And Ocean Winds believes that, and I think most of the European players believe that Japan should not lag behind. Japan is ready, Japan is capable, it's an advanced country, and you're able to do it. The only thing we need is more clarity on regulation. I think that's the first stone. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Pelayo, for so insightful information and your thought. Maybe I want to ask a more specific question about floating. I think you are one of the organization who is taking a kind of a group action for acceleration of the floating wind introduction. And what will be the necessary action for Japan to accelerate the process for floating? Do you have any opinion?
Of course, I have to. Maybe it's too much to try to be brief, but basically, we see Japan with all the electricity consumption, the high density of population, and with a very, very small strip of shallow waters. If you look at the geography of Japan, we will find out that deep waters are just, if you get like the projects that we're seeing in the first round, second rounds are very, very close to the shore. So the huge potential and also the wind speeds that we face and we can see farther away from the coast are more substantial. In that regard, we believe Japan, similar to my home country, Spain or Italy or California, the western part of the US, an area which will be floating offshore wind. The big caveat to this is that where you have Spain or most of the even UK having targets for a floating offshore wind, Japan has give a very broad target without specifically mentioning what are the floating objectives. And of course, the most important thing, there is no regulation farther away from the coast. So you have 12 nautical miles, roughly 20 kilometers, that are within the scope of the current regulation. But then when you really want to go outside that, the scope, for example, the project that we are right now, the first project that we develop in Korea is 70 kilometers from the coast. So in Japan, there is no way at this moment, nobody knows the regulation on that area. And we're looking forward to see if that's possible, if the Japanese government really want to be involved in floating, which is the technology, and I think the kind of offshore wind that will be interesting from the country long future, or not. I think this has changed for the last 2 years. Just to finalize and brief, 2 years ago, everyone was thinking that floating was something very far into the future, like maybe after 2030, kind of R&D to be studying university. Nowadays, this has changed. Everyone said, oh, floating is real, floating is happening. The big next question is when. And this is the most of the countries in the world is like, we want to do it as soon as possible. Japan is just deciding when. And we hope that the industry decides that is soon, the same as Korea or Europe, and as soon as possible, we have some regulation on that. I'm looking forward to work with all of you in the industry to have that. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, I think it's important also for other policy. Offshore wind, must be really, more fast shore, because the current, project, very near shore, and there's a really concern of, maybe too much visual impact and potentially noise, and I think idea of offshore is really making it large, to achieve economics of the scale, and I think going far and deep is, I think it's very important for Japan. Okay, thank you, Pelayo. So I think I want to now ask Iwao-san, what will be the challenge, for financial for the current, offshore wind market? Can you please share your thought, with us?
Okay. So actually, of course, there are various issues. Actually, for example, however, so if I limit the only 3 important points at the moment, actually, the number 1 is actually the past experiences of the developers and sponsors for offshore winds. And the secondary, so I'd like to mention the reliability, technical reliability, and also the past experiences, the wind turbine manufacturers, and also past experiences of the offshore construction, of BOP EPC contractors. And then so thirdly, the important issue is actually curtailment issues. It's very closely related to the grid connection issues, as many people pointed out. And then I would like to also mention the so regarding multi-contracts issues, actually, we often mention that. I mean, we often talk about it. However, financial institutions usually don't require EPC wrap these days because of the widespread of the usage of the multi-contracts in European offshore markets, offshore wind farm markets, and also I would like to also mention about the hardening of the insurance market, including capacity cap of insurance availability, and also obviously the recent rising prices of the construction cost due to inflation. Thank you.
Thank you. It's quite interesting. I'm quite pleased to hear that you are quite flexible and open to accept like a multi-contracting strategy for EPC. I think now renders are more aggressive, but maybe you have to be to support this growing industry. I think it's a great news to hear, and I think there are a lot of things we can discuss with others, maybe in Q&A sessions. And now I'd like to ask Nakagawa-san to share what you view on your challenges, particularly supply chain, how it can be achieved. That's a very crucial agenda. Nakagawa-san, could you please share your opinion with us?
Uchida-san, thank you very much for heading up the supply chain discussions. Yes. Now I think that in the Japanese market, we are now in the very primitive stages, like level 2 or 3 out of 10, because I would like to 3 points in terms of the supply chains. One is that round 1 results reveal the significant delays on the start of construction and the start of the operation. Unfortunately, in our plan for the round 1, construction was the planned to start in the year 2024, 2025, and the operation was also planned to be done in the year 2027. But currently, 2 years or 3 years are delaying right now. So this is the first reason. And second reason is that many suppliers are now feeling the kind of harshness of the reality due to the fact that only one developer was awarded in the round 1 auction results, and the bidding price was really lower than expected. So I have the impression that the domestic appetite or ambition for the investment has been a little bit damaged. And lastly, when I take a look at the sunny side of the situation in the overall business, I believe that local content rates is already at the level of 50%. So regardless of the circumstances, it was good. It was good to start the commercial-based offshore wind business in Japan. So one thing that I would like to praise, or I feel right now, is that I feel a little bit unfortunate that we don't see any much willingness that a domestic fabricator or domestic suppliers to take advantage of the current weak yen situation. This is my feelings about supply chain situation in Japan.
Thank you, Nakagawa-san, for sharing your view, and it's very informative. Yeah, I think we have to deal with a lot of things. I think, yeah, result with round 1 was maybe quite shocking for many developers, because opportunity was only given to the one group and one wind turbine manufacturer, and doesn't really diversify opportunity for establishing a supply chain. So I think that's yeah, some really clear feedback from the industry. So yeah. Okay, and I also like to ask all the participants about your view on new technology. It's not really new, but how offshore wind can utilize energy storage and potentially production of hydrogen, which those can be some solution for lack of grid connection capacity. So does anybody have any view? Please feel free to share your opinion, please.
If I may, just very briefly saying that I think those are very interesting technologies. We are seeing Japan particularly very much invested in hydrogen, in other aspects, of course, not only related to offshore. Storage is also very interesting. I mean, it's what everyone wants to achieve, and be able to store electricity will be like a dream. But I think if I go exactly to your point, Uchida-san, I think for at least from our point of view, is that we shouldn't think about those technologies forgetting about the need to improve the grid in Japan. That's the first point. I think it should be improved. We should have better grid availability, grid capacity, and that's in a way an answer to your question. That I think at this stage, and where we are in hydrogen and storage, that those two technologies alone will not avoiding an improvement or needed improvement in the grid in Japan. That will be my take on your question.
Yeah, I fully agree with you. I think the most important thing we have to attack is really more transparent procedure to get a grid connection capacity. Yeah, and there must be a lot more capacity available. But I think that the issue is that there's no third-party appraisal of available capacity, and that is a big difference, compared to the other, advanced market. And yeah, and there must be some room, for inviting a third-party assessor for the available capacity. And in other countries like Germany, I think a company like DNB is doing certification for grid connection. So I think the process is very transparent, and yeah. And after those transparent technical discussion, and then the next phase is how much we want to invest to boost grid connection, because grid connection is really key. That's really key for all the renewables, including onshore and offshore. So yeah, and there must be also a lot of room for onshore development. Yeah, that's my view. Yeah.
So from it's okay.
Yes.
Yeah, actually, so regarding the a strategy regarding the hydrogen usage, the production. Actually, of course, I totally agree with the Uchida-san and also Pelayo. Of course, we have to prioritize the strengthening of the grid connection. I mean transmission, including of course the high voltage DC transmission line between Hokkaido and Tokyo. And then also regarding the other option of the solution of the storage so using the green hydrogen. And so maybe the challenge is that kind of cost of reduction of the cost of the electrolyzer. Yeah, that's my opinion. Yeah.
Thank you, Iwao-san. Yeah. So perhaps I think we see about time to raise a question each other between the panelists. Please feel free to raise questions between you and yeah, before opening the question to the all the participants online. So
Okay, can I start?
please.
Yes, I'm very keen to hear everyone's views on corporate PPAs. So as Tanabe Sensei mentioned that from round 3, the offshore wind will be based on FIP rather than FIT, and FIP can be combined with corporate PPA. Then the developers have a lot of interesting, room to improve the economics by engaging with power purchasing customers directly. So yeah, I would like to ask other panelists on what their current views on corporate PPA markets in Japan.
Okay, from me, actually, we SMTB are closely, very actively considering the financing methods of the corporate PPAs, CPPAs. But actually, maybe not starting from the offshore wind power, maybe starting from small scale of the solar parks, maybe. But actually, we are so much interested in that area. So we would like to materialize the projects. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, but I think corporate PPA will be a quite interesting initiative, to really to provide more, a wider selection of financing option for the developers, and yeah, so it could be a quite interesting instrument, for development. And I think there are, many larger number of consumers who are really keen to contribute, to the carbon neutral society. Leading company like Toyota Motors, I think that these companies have a very ambitious target and action. So I think corporate PPA will be a really useful instrument.
Yeah, that's right. Totally agree. And yeah, it's very encouraging to hear from Iwao-san that SMTB is closely monitoring the situation. I think financing based on corporate PPA would be definitely the key. So yeah, I'd love lenders to start considering this kind of structure earlier than later. Just to share what we are seeing in the market. So we actually started marketing for potential corporate PPA in Japan about 1 year ago. We've been talking to lots of non-Japanese and Japanese companies, and we definitely see interest in corporate PPA increasing really day by day. I think currently the demand is mainly led by non-Japanese companies who have operation in Japan, such as large-scale US-based IT companies or European manufacturers who have factories in Japan, etc. So we expect maybe next 2 or 3 years, market is going to be led by mainly non-Japanese companies. But after that, I think Japanese companies will bring a lot of demand to the market. And there are many companies like chemical companies or manufacturing companies like car companies you mentioned, but also semiconductor companies, glass companies, etc. So they have each company in those sectors have really large demand in Japan, like almost hundreds of megawatts to 1 gigawatt. So yeah, we should definitely, as an industry, work together to kind of wake up, these demand, and we should capture the opportunities.
If I made up to this discussion of corporate PPAs, from a development perspective, I think it sounds, in terms of theoretically speaking, it sounds like FIT is more stable, it's more clear, but the potential for PPAs in Japan is very interesting. The key point here is was mentioned by Tanabe-san in his presentation. We're referring him a lot. That means that the presentation was very good. The fact that we now talk about the feed-in premium, but he said, like, I'm one of the guild person asking him if it's the same as the contract for different in the UK. I asked him previously about this in other webinars. And the point is how different will be the system in Japan. So we're coming back again to regulation. Regarding offshore wind, corporate PPAs are very interesting, but how are going to be applicable? And I have a question for Mihara-san, and I think you touched a little bit on that, but from a perspective, we are very used to do it in Europe, and we're seeing foreign companies, of course, US companies, you mentioned, probably IT companies, very much involved in corporate PPAs. Do you think Japanese companies, we haven't had the chance to talk a lot at this moment with Japanese companies on corporate PPAs. Do you think they will engage to this? It will take a lot of time in traditional countries like Japan for this to happen, and they are afraid what their concerns. If you have any views on that, it will be interesting for me to hear.
Yeah, thank you. This is very interesting discussion. And yeah, we started talking to many Japanese industrial companies, and definitely they will take some time. I would say maybe 2 years from now, before they can actually start signing something. But they are really studying a lot, and they are doing a lot of work. Also, there is a industry association like Japan Climate Leadership Panel, which actually is really educating all the large demand customers. So they are doing a great job. So yeah, definitely they are taking small but certain steps. I think we should just keep talking to them and keep educating them. Yeah, just to get them up to speed. I see a lot of potential, definitely.
Thank you for the interesting discussion. I think we have now got one question from the audience. The question from Brian Schmidt. Are there any concerns about the energy loss incurred to energy storage with battery or hydrogen? Are the alternative energy storage solutions like gravity storage being considered? Does anyone want to answer to this question?
I think you're better placed, Uchida-san.
Yeah, I can, but I have to give opportunity to the other people to speak, before I jump in. So please, if you don't, maybe I will say. I think Pelayo pointed out that our really focus is really to tackle to the grid connection matter before. Of course, these challenges for technical development of energy storage and hydrogen need to also take place in parallel, but it takes a bit longer to really achieve, some logistic issues and safety issues, and most importantly, to achieve a cost competitiveness for this solution. And so the first focus must be really grid connection. Then the battery, I think the technology has been significantly improved, for last decade, but the system itself, really involves a lot of energy losses because the system really, it really eats a lot of electricity. That's really the problem. It consumes a lot of electricity, just to keep it at a high temperature to be active. And yeah, so it's a huge energy loss already. So yeah, of course, we really like to minimize the loss, which is attached to the system itself. So this technology really need to be improved a lot more, And the hydrogen, of course, there'll be a lot of matters for how to produce it, in a cost-effective manner, and transportation, and maybe using pipeline. And I think there's a lot of safety also issues to be addressed. And I think we have a hydrogen lab in Europe, and we claim we are really the technical leader for hydrogen. And yeah, but there has been a lot of effort, maybe for next, maybe, yeah, I hope it get happen quicker, but it may take maybe another 10 years, maybe. Yeah, maybe I'm wrong, but I think that's the kind of situation.
Okay, so from the financial viewpoint regarding
Yes.
about the storage, actually, so you have already studied the financing the projects which uses the battery storage. However, in the calculation, of course, there's obviously the loss of energy under the current technology. So we have to calculate the such losses also in our cash flow model, and so we can finance the renewable energies such as solar and wind powers using battery storage. Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you. Yeah, I think we started to receiving a lot of interesting questions. So yeah, I think now we are now focusing on those questions as long as we have time. And so Chen Yuan Diao, thank you for your question. He or she has two questions. Question one, what's the impact for developers and industrial investors, respectively, with the offshore support scheme, transiting from FIT to FIP? Any concerns and solutions to respond? I think we already discussed this, but if anything to add. Are we kind of accepting this movement from FIT to FIP? Nakagawa-san, please. Yeah.
Yes. So I would like to add one more supplementary discussion about the corporate PPAs. When we take a look at the Japanese manufacturers who is consuming much more so many electricity in Japan, so they also purchasing a very competitive electricity pricing. I mean, quite lower than what we have expecting right now. So this is the one difficulties that developers are facing in terms of the corporate PPA agreements. So yes, actually, when we take a look at the FIP schemes, we need to find out good off-takers and having our good corporate PPAs. At the same time, we needed to squeeze out the competitive electricity pricing out of the offshore wind LCOE. And this is my ideas.
Thank you. Yeah. And yeah, so the second question from same person. Japan currently has no local turbine OEMs, which means has no reply on the international turbine OEMs, except the Western turbine OEM. Now, what's everyone's view on the Chinese turbine OEM? Any opportunity, any concerns? Yeah, I think the current market is really occupied by only big 3 OEMs for offshore wind, and I think technically speaking, Chinese OEM must have opportunity. I think, and I think they are starting establishing a good track record, in the market, where I mean the Chinese industry developed in a unique way because I think their focus was firstly domestic market, and many of them kind of started, licensing arrangement, to buy a design from a European designer. But I think under this arrangement, many of them are really restricted to sell their turbine in only domestic market. And a few of them, I think, they didn't have that restriction. I think these company like Envision or Goldwind, I think they are really aggressively exporting those their product to the market where they are free from restriction, and I think they are becoming more popular in like South America, this type of market. So I think and they shouldn't have any restriction for exporting to Japan. So I think market is open.
If I may add, go ahead, Mihara-san, you first.
Thank you. Yeah, I wanted to add, because of round 1 results, I think developers are much more open to consider various options for turbines, as long as they are cost competitive, but also to score high in the auction. Some sort of localization is also important. So if Chinese manufacturers want to, enter Japanese market, probably partnership with Japanese manufacturers, that's the competitiveness GE had in round 1. GE has a partnership with Toshiba, and so they are going to manufacture the nacelle domestically. So that kind of partnership would be the key, I think. Sorry, thank you, Pelayo.
No problem. Thank you so much. It was similar to what I was going to mention. We saw that kind of not clear rule, but the 60% localization of the supply chain. Maybe Nakagawa-san can explain more about that. But basically, I don't know, and this is for you. I mean, I'm the only non-Japanese in the panel, but this is for you to also fully understand the Japanese market. Usually, we've seen, for example, in solar that are very welcoming module manufacturers like Trina or Jinko. But in terms of offshore wind, the turbine is such a big part of the whole wind farm that, as Mihara-san was mentioning, maybe a partnership would be required to enter the Japanese market. I see difficulties on having pure Chinese manufacturer, even a pure European, like the 3 bigs. We're seeing like there's some relation, even Mitsubishi Vestas now changed and is kind of half in Japan. Then we have GM with Toshiba. So a partnership is maybe the key to entering the market. And as we know, there's different parts on the turbine, from nacelle, blades, and tower. And some of them can be produced in Japan. So, I mean, happy to hear Nakagawa-san some opinions on the supply chain, but I think they have to Japanize somehow the manufacturer. Not pure Chinese will be, I think, a little bit complicated for the Japanese market. That's my opinion.
Thank you. And maybe a similar question from Martin Elbaz. The question about how market can be open for EPC and the transportation installation scope, to the international market. Does anybody have any view?
Yes. It actually says there is a big risk transporting a big component from Europe to Asia. And so in terms of the transportation risk minimizing, we needed to think about local supply or supply chain building. And one comment to the WTG and manufacturing in Japan. Actually, there is no such clear regulations that WTG, obviously WTG suppliers have some kind of partnership in Japan, but they usually WTG manufacturers are facing a very high level of entry barriers that the Japanese wind industry practice kind of things, like having a Class T certification, applying to the Japanese market, or having they comply to the Japanese construction codes, or having a good lightning protection systems, and so on. So one good approach to get into Japanese market is having very good partnership, I think.
Okay. Thank you. Yeah. So I think we had quite a interesting discussion today, and I think Mori is just reminding me that it's time for closing our discussion. And do you want to wrap up discussion?
Yes, I'm all good here, and thank you so much for organizing this very interesting panel. And yes, I think we come to an end of today's event, but I want to extend my sincere appreciation again to all the speakers and audience who are staying with us. I'm sorry I bothered your lunchtime. For this panel and for the overall session, I think we have successfully touched around 80% of the market pinpoints, from the regulatory to development, finance, to supply chain, and some innovative route to market schemes that may emerge in the near future. Definitely the discussion will not end as we continue monitoring the market. And indeed, we look forward to meeting all of you in person sometimes this year, so the discussion can be made through face-to-face contact. As much as I'd love to have you talk forever, but this is the end. I thank Uchida-san, thank Mihara, thank Nakagawa-san and Iwao-san, also Pelayo, for joining us, and Tanabe-san for joining us. Thank you for your kind insights sharing. Thank you very much.
Very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you. Thank you, Tanabe-san. Thank you, Iwao-san. And thank you, everyone, to the audience. This is the end of the session. Have a good lunch break.